In this video, we're going to go through the form W-4, and we're going to take a look at exactly who is supposed to be supplying a W-4 and what specifically does it mean when you give someone a W-4. So we're going to start off with section 26 USC 3402A1. 3402 is the section of the code that actually imposes the tax. It's where it says that you have to pay this tax. And it says every employer making payment of wages shall deduct and withhold upon such wages a tax determined in accordance with tables or computational procedures prescribed by the secretary. So just a couple things. It's not talking about income, people making income from employment or anything else. It just says wages. So we've got a term called wages because it doesn't say payment of remuneration. It says payment of wages. So we need to understand what exactly that's talking about. And it's talking about an employer. So it's an employer that is doing this. So we need to understand a couple of these terms. So let's take a look at 3401 is the definition section for 3402. So looking in 3401, we find D, which is the definition for employer. And it says the term employer means the person for whom an individual performs or performed any service of whatever nature as the employee of such person. So we now kind of have a definition for employer, but it's based on the definition for an employee. So we need to go on and see if we can figure out what that is. But before we go on, look at what it says. It says, except that if the person for whom the individual performs or performed the service does not have control of the payment of the wages for such services, the term employer means the person having control of the wages. So essentially what they're saying is that if, say I hire a payroll company and they're the ones that are doing the payroll, so all I'm doing is putting money into their account, they're taking that money and then dispersing it to all the employees. They are the employer, not me. So that's essentially what this is saying, is that whoever has control of the money is the one that's considered the employer. Now, you kind of see that employer, payor, and benefit withholding agent are all synonymous terms, and so it's really saying that this money must have something to do with a non-resident alien, because those terms are only defined as people that are controlling money for non-resident aliens. But we'll keep going. So 3401C, employee. So now we get to the definition of an employee, and it says it is an officer, employee, or elected official of the United States, a state, or any political subdivision thereof, or the District of Columbia, or any agency or instrumentality of any one of the foregoing. So an employee is a government worker, federal government worker, and an employer is someone who employs a federal government worker. So let's go on to 3401A, which defines wages as all remuneration paid to an employee for his employer. So now we know wages have something, they're specifically limited to this employer-employee relationship, of which they've given us the definitions for. So, and we're having a thunderstorm outside if you can hear any of the lightning and stuff. But so 3402P3A says it's a voluntary withholding agreement W-4. So now we're talking about a W-4. Now, I want to just ask a question. Who actually asks for you to fill out a W-4? There's only one person, and it's an employer. And it's, when I say person, I'm meaning their definition. So an employer is someone who asks you for a W-4, and they're really the only people that ever ask you for a W-4. And so what this is doing is it's saying that this is a voluntary withholding agreement W-4. So a W-4, if you look at the title on it, it says it's a withholding certificate, and there's definitions and stuff for that as well. But it's just kind of key to keep up with the fact that we're talking about a voluntary withholding agreement, and a withholding agreement or withholding certificate is there to change or to set your status as a certain type of person. So you have voluntarily given them a W-4 W-4, which is caused them to say your status is someone holding money for a non-resident alien. So we're going to keep on going here. So 1441C, again, we're back in the non-resident alien section now, and it tells you to refer to section 871B2 for the taxable year. It says, and which is included in the gross income of the recipient under 871. So we'll go take a look at 871, and it says specifically gross income includes only gross income which is effectively connected with the conduct of a trade or a business within the United States. Now, I'm not going to jump into the trade or business here, but the trade or business is essentially a government office, if you go look up the definition for it, but I didn't put it in here, so we'll kind of skip over that. All right, so now let's take a look at 1441C, which is withholding on non-resident aliens. And they link in employer when they do this. Sorry, the power just went out. So they link in the employer when they actually go in and do this, because they say to the extent that any such items constitute gross income from sources within the United States or of any non-resident alien or individual or any foreign partnership. So we now know that an employer is the same thing as a withholding agent. We've kind of, they're using these words synonymously. All right, so now it goes on in 1441-4C2, alternate withholding election. So this is an alternate election, and you'll see it says a withholding agent, employer, payor, they're all the same. A withholding agent may elect to withhold the amounts described in paragraph C1 of this section at the rates applicable under section 3402. We're in non-resident alien section, and now it is referring to payroll taxes. 3402 is where we started this whole thing off. So now we've gone from the payroll section 3402 into the non-resident alien, and now we're back to payroll. And it says, I'm going to start of this section at the rates applicable under section 3402 as if the income were wages. Such election shall be made by obtaining a Form W-4. So, in other words, a Form W-4 is the election to treat income from wherever as wages. And we know wages are this money being paid by this employer, which is a government agency. So, this is the election, the mechanism for us to be able to declare that we would like for them to treat our income as being wages under the payroll section. It goes on to say the fact that the withholding agent asks, so all they got to do is ask you, the beneficial owner. Well, this, if you remember from the beneficial owner section, I was talking about the fact that they kind of tie the W-4 and the beneficial owner are tied together. They're basically the same thing. And so this proves that the employee that we were kind of talking about has the additional constraint of being what's known as a beneficial owner. And you can go back and watch that video if you want to see what a beneficial owner is. To furnish a W-4, so all they have to do is ask you to do this. And it says, or income to take into account, preparing such Form W-4 shall serve as notice. So in other words, they're notifying you just by asking for this particular account, and you're preparing this W-4, that you are letting them know that you are to be a beneficial owner, that the income is being treated as wages for the purpose of withholding tax under Section 1441. Now, I want you to think about something. This is literally saying, just assume that you disagree with me on payroll taxes. Say you completely disagree with what payroll taxes actually are. This is actually saying that by them giving you a W-4 and you preparing that W-4 to give back, that is notice to you that they are going to treat any income that you're making from the company that you're filling that W-4 out for, you're electing to treat that as wages, which are money coming from within the United States, gross income, only from sources within the United States that we just looked at, you're electing to treat your income as wages under Section 1441. 1441 is non-resident alien stuff. So by filling out a W-4, you are electing to treat your income as if it were income for a non-resident alien. I mean, it's explicitly what this is saying. So you can go over back to the beneficial owner to see what's going on with that. And then we'll talk about the W-2 and 1040 and all that stuff in another video. But the one thing I kind of wanted to give you an example of, and I've heard another guy that I'm not going to mention because he's a pansy and can't have conversations with people, and I don't want to advertise for his stuff, but he gave a pretty good example, is that there's code sections in the USC that refer to people that work at nuclear power plants. And the code section says you have to be a United States citizen. And so only United States citizens can work in a nuclear power plant. And I'm just making this up. It may or may not be true, but you'll get the point. So only United States citizens can work in a nuclear power plant. And those employees of the nuclear power plant are required to fill out certain documentation noting, problems they're having or things that they see in the plant that maybe need to be reported, whatever, just make up some form. So the question becomes, does that mean that all United States citizens have to fill out those forms, or only the people that work in nuclear power plants? And juxtapose that against the income tax. Does the fact that they say that all United States citizens are required to pay this tax, does that mean that that tax applies to all United States citizens? And it obviously doesn't. It explicitly lists here that it's only for non-resident aliens, and it's more specifically only gross income from sources within the United States, and they've defined the United States as being the District of Columbia. It does not include the several states. So this income tax that all of us are paying are all basing it on either a 1099 and a W-9, or we're basing it off of employment taxes, and both of which are tied explicitly to non-resident aliens. And we are literally saying that we are either a beneficial owner, which is someone that's sitting a conduit payment, and we're holding money for a non-resident alien, or that we are a non-resident alien, and that the money that we're being paid is actually, we want it to be treated as if it were from within the United States, even if it isn't. And there's code sections in there that explicitly say that. So we need to understand what it is we're actually doing when we sign a W-4, because we've been led to believe, and here is the W-4, it's a employee withholding certificate. We've been led to believe that withholding certificate was there for us to put in how many exemptions we wanted to take. But what we did not realize is that when we signed that, we were actually saying that we want our income to be treated as wages from within the United States, and that we're holding it for a non-resident alien. And that's explicitly what they say in the codes, and there are no other code sections that say anything different.